Most fruit tree problems people try to solve with fertilizer actually start with a misunderstanding about iron in the soil. I see gardeners every year dumping bags of micronutrient mixes under their trees because the leaves look pale, the growth is weak, or the fruit size is disappointing. They assume the soil is missing iron, so they add more. The result is usually wasted money and the same symptoms coming back a few months later. The truth is that most soils already contain plenty of iron. The truth is that most soils already contain plenty of iron. The truth is that most soils already contain plenty of iron. The real issue is whether that iron is actually available to the tree roots. And that's exactly why every March, before the growing season kicks into full gear, I bury rusty nails around my fruit trees. Before we get into the details, if you're the kind of grower who likes practical techniques that actually improve yields and soil health, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. This channel is built for serious gardeners who want better harvests, not just gardening trends. Let's talk about why March is the perfect time to do this. So, early spring is when fruit trees start demanding iron again. Right before bud break, fruit trees begin ramping up nutrient demand. Apples, peaches, citrus, plums, and figs all start pulling minerals out of the soil to support new leaf growth and flower production. Iron plays a critical role here because it drives chlorophyll production. Without enough available iron, the tree struggles to build healthy leaves, and the whole energy system of the plant slows down. What you usually see first is intervenal chlorosis. The leaves turn yellow, while the veins remain green. Many gardeners think that means the soil has no iron left. But in most cases, the soil contains huge amounts of iron locked in mineral form. The problem is that the iron is oxidized and, unavailable to roots. That's where the rusty nail trick comes in. When plain steel rusts in soil, it slowly forms iron oxides and tiny amounts of soluble iron that microbes can convert into plant-available forms. It's not a fast process, but honestly, that's exactly why it works so well around fruit trees. So, instead of dumping a large dose of soluble iron that disappears quickly, you're actually creating a slow-release iron source that can last for months or even years. In my orchard rows, I usually bury small uncoated steel nails around the drip line of each tree. The drip line is where the feeder roots are most active, which is exactly where you want the iron entering the soil. For a young tree about 2 years old, I'll bury around 10 to 15 nails, roughly 6 inches deep. For a mature tree with a wider canopy, that number usually goes up to 25 or 30 nails, spaced evenly around the drip line. The nails don't have to be large. Actually, smaller steel nails rust faster because, they have more surface area exposed to moisture and microbes. And yes, they should already be rusty. If they're new, they'll still work, but pre-rusted nails start interacting with the soil biology much sooner. This works especially well in compost-rich soil. Fruit trees respond incredibly well when iron sources are paired with organic matter. Compost drives microbial activity, and those microbes help convert iron into forms the roots can absorb. In my garden, every fruit tree gets a compost ring about 2 to 3 inches thick each spring. That ring sits right above the area where the nails are buried. The compost holds moisture, feeds microbes, and encourages the slow chemical reactions that unlock iron. One mistake people make is thinking compost works automatically. In reality, compost only becomes a powerful nutrient engine when it reaches the right biological activity level. And that activity is largely driven by temperature. When a compost pile reaches about 130 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit in the center, microbial decomposition becomes extremely efficient. That's when nutrients stabilize properly, and beneficial microbes multiply rapidly. A tool that really helped me understand my compost system was the RioTemp 20-inch backyard compost thermometer. It's basically a long stainless steel probe that reaches into the center of the pile so you can see exactly how active the compost is instead of guessing from the outside. When I started using one, I realized some of my compost piles were barely active while others were running hot and breaking down much faster. If you're curious about it, I've put a link in the description. It's one of those simple tools that makes composting far more predictable once you start producing larger piles. Now back to the rusty nail method. The soil biology around fruit trees does most of the real work. Fruit trees rely heavily on microbial partnerships in the soil. Bacteria and fungi around the root zone produce compounds called siderophores that bind iron and deliver it directly to plant roots. When small iron sources like nails begin oxidizing in that environment, microbes interact with those minerals and help convert them into usable forms. The result is a steady low-level supply of iron entering the root zone. This is much closer to how natural forest soils operate. Instead of sudden spikes of nutrients, the soil slowly releases minerals as organic matter decomposes and metals oxidize. That stability is one reason trees respond so well to this approach. I started experimenting with this method after seeing recurring chlorosis on a few young peach trees in a slightly alkaline section of my yard. Even though I was adding compost every season, the leaves would turn pale by midsummer. So, one spring I buried about 20 rusty nails around each tree's drip line and topped the area with fresh compost. The difference wasn't instant, but by early summer the new leaves were noticeably darker green, and the chlorosis barely returned that season. The method isn't magic, but it supports the biological processes that trees already rely on. There are situations where nails won't solve the problem. It's important to be honest about the limits of this trick. If your soil pH is extremely high, above about 8, iron availability becomes extremely restricted. In those cases, you usually need to address soil pH first using sulfur or acidifying organic matter. Likewise, trees growing in heavily compacted soil may struggle to absorb nutrients regardless of how much iron exists. Roots need oxygen and microbial activity. Without those conditions, iron availability becomes, kind of secondary. That's why I always combine the rusty nail method with soil improvement strategies like compost, mulch, and proper watering. Healthy soil structure matters far more than any single amendment. Now, if you're growing fruiting plants hydroponically, dropping nails into a nutrient reservoir obviously isn't the way to go. Hydro systems rely on soluble nutrients, so iron is usually supplied through chelated forms that remain stable in water. But, the principle remains the same. Iron must stay in a form plants can absorb. Whether that's through chelation in hydroponics or microbial cycling in soil, availability matters more than total quantity. And in soil gardens, slow oxidation from iron pieces works surprisingly well as part of that cycle. The real lesson here is about how we think about soil nutrients. A lot of modern gardening advice encourages constant inputs, more fertilizers, more supplements, more products. But experienced growers eventually notice something different. The healthiest fruit trees usually grow in soil systems where nutrients move slowly and naturally through biological processes. Rusty nails feeding iron into compost-rich soil might sound simple, but it mirrors the way natural ecosystems cycle minerals. Iron oxidizes, microbes interact with it, roots absorb what they need, and the cycle continues. It's slow, stable, and surprisingly effective. So, every March, before the fruit trees wake up fully, I walk through the garden with a handful of rusty nails and bury them around the drip lines. It takes maybe 15 minutes per tree, costs almost nothing, and quietly supports the mineral balance of the soil all season long. If you found this helpful and want more practical methods like this that actually work in real gardens and orchards, subscribe to the channel. And if you know another grower who keeps fighting yellow leaves on their fruit trees, share this video with them. Because the best harvests don't come from buying more products. They come from understanding how the soil system actually works and using that knowledge to grow better food year after year.